All right, good evening, everyone. So it is my immense pleasure to introduce Dr. Joan Donovan. Joan Donovan is a preeminent expert in media manipulation, disinformation, and adversarial media movements. She is currently an assistant professor of journalism and emerging media studies in the College of Communications at Boston University. She is also the founder of the Critical Internet Studies Institute, a nonprofit that fosters knowledge mobilization and organizes advocacy for a public interest internet. In 2022, she co-authored a book entitled Meme Wars, The Untold Story of Online Battles Upending Democracy. Fun fact, she is also a creator of the beaver emoji on the internet. Maybe she'll tell us a little bit more about that. And she is also a member of a punk band. I think we all want to hear that story as well. But what? Yeah, absolutely. But I also want to acknowledge Joan as a friend and also acknowledge her as one of the first people outside of librarianship to say your work in disinformation is important. And so I'm very grateful for all of the opportunities and for answering my email when I said, Joan, don't you want to come to South Carolina in March when it's raining? And she said yes. So please welcome Dr. Joan Donovan.
Where's my glass award? Oh, you got an extra one. All right, thank you. I thought I was getting this. I don't know what that is either. Hey all, I made it. It's 7-something in the evening. I shut off at like 9 p.m., so let's make this somewhat quick and dirty. I'm like looking out at you and I'm like, uh-oh, y'all not ready for these ideas. And a lot of it has to do with understanding the last 10 years of how the internet has changed politics and how we've moved from thinking about social media as giving social movements voice to the voiceless, allowing us to move into this highly participatory society. And where we are now, which I think is best described by the concept or the idea of net war, where the battle isn't necessarily just about positionality online. It's really a battle for your hearts and your minds, not just your attention, but your resources, including monetary resources, but then also the digital self that leaves these data trails behind that then become monetized for different companies. So in some ways, I'm probably not telling you nothing you don't already know, but I've spent a really long time studying this, so at least humor me. Let me see if this or this works. This works. So when we talk about memes and memetic warfare, we're really talking about the use of slogans, images, and video on social media in persuasive political campaigns. So in the past, we might call this political communication. We might talk about the campaign savviness of different politicians who come up with slogans like "I like Ike," right? Memes from the past that have been useful for political campaigns, except what's different about political campaigns pre-social media and post-social media is effectively at pre-social media, you had to get people to come in and volunteer and door knock and really try to persuade people that your candidate is the right choice. But online, what you have is something quite different. We have this situation in which it might be a constituent that wants you to vote for a certain person, or you might be getting political ads that are part of marketing or dark money agenda. Or you might think you're seeing content from someone who is American and they're actually Russian. And there's something about online communication that we make assumptions about how online companies vet and distribute information. And those assumptions are things that we could maybe the New York Times and the Washington Post aren't the best, sources of journalism. Sometimes they get it wrong. But if you do subscribe and they do get it wrong, generally they will issue a retraction. But there's no such way of error correcting on social media. And what we know goes viral are things that are both novel and outrageous. So in a way, information online is reminiscent of tabloid culture. You go to the checkout counter at the grocery store and you look at the Weekly World News and it said Bat Boy's back and you're like, this poor child, right? But we kind of know it's meant to be novel and outrageous and funny. We know it's not the Weekly World News. Which is all to say that online, if it bleeds, it leads, surely. And the way in which we've put tech moguls at the top of our information pyramid has them behaving a lot more like Rupert Murdoch, and the Murdochs of the past in this new position where at best they're at least hand-waving at being pro-democracy, and at worst they seek to support authoritarians and unaccountable government. So when we're talking about meme wars, we're really trying to think about, well, what kind of content really makes a meme? And usually memes are authorless, that is, we don't know where they come from, or they're not necessarily pushing a specific political candidate or a product. They promote in-groups and out-groups, so if you're really into ballet, you might share memes about ballet. If you're a military family, you might share memes about being in the military, and some of it is funny. And what it does is it binds groups together if they're sharing media about their groups. And often we use this word sticky, that is, they tend to be memorable. So if I say to you something like, just do it, or I'm loving it, I don't need to tell you what companies I'm talking about because that's sticky advertising. And then the other thing about memes that's different about social media is that they're participatory, which is to say that they invite people in to create new memes or to create new meaning. And this has become the political culture of the internet that is now being reflected in political campaigns. For example, dark MAGA, ultra MAGA. So this was something that in May 2022 and beyond, the Trump campaign and others were trying to launch on the internet. So you have Marjorie Taylor Greene with her laser eyes. When it comes to making America great again, I'm all in, and I can't even understand anyone who's not, right? Not super memeable, not that interesting. Paul Gosar, again, really trying to push this idea that there's something dark and cool about MAGA. And then also Trump was trying to pivot to this is ultra MAGA country, this idea that like there's a 2.0 version of Make America Great Again, which is also a meme. MAGA memes were prolific in 2016 and really invited in a whole bunch of other Trump supporters that were not necessarily even people we would consider a voting bloc, but nevertheless, Gen Z, Gen Alpha were really posting through it in terms of how we ended up getting a president with such a catchy slogan as Make America Great Again, right? And the other thing about that slogan, of course, is that it invites this kind of critique immediately of what kind of again, what kind of returning, right? So ultimately people were like, make America white again, right? But they were still using that same language and that same frame to discuss meme wars. You guys seen this guy popping up on Twitter and other places? So the night of the Super Bowl, Biden launches his dark Brandon campaign on TikTok. And this has been something that the White House digital strategy team has been crafting for a long time. This idea that Biden isn't just this old guy that likes ice cream and cookies. He's actually a mastermind at playing politics. You can only believe one thing about Biden. He's sleepy Joe and he's incompetent, or he's like mastermind, laser eyes, like controlling the world government. And Let's Go Brandon was an interesting rejoinder, because what had happened was there was a race, a car race, and the man who won it, his name was Brandon, and he was being interviewed by one of the sports stations. And someone walked by and said, "Fuck Joe Biden." And the newscaster said, "Wait, what did he say?" Like, isn't trying to, they're broadcast TV, delicate, feelings. And then the race car driver, Brandon, he said, "I think he said, 'Let's go, Brandon.'" And instantly a meme was born. And so then you start to see folks like Ted Cruz and another representative wearing masks talking about "Let's go, Brandon." And so the mashup of dark MAGA with "Let's go, Brandon" is really Biden's main press strategy for how he's going to win the internet. I will tell you, in consultation with the White House digital strategy team, I said, this is a bad idea. I don't think you know who you're talking to. I don't think this is going to resonate, but you work with what you have, right? And so they've started to roll out more and more of these dark Brandon memes, and you will see them more and more as you travel around. I even saw someone with a yard sign with Biden with the laser eyes going. And, this actually became popular in the 70s with a comic book. That's where the true origin of the meme comes from. So what's happening here with social media is quite different from how we've thought about political communication and communication culture in the past. What's happened is what we call weaponized design. So it's electronic systems whose designs either do not account for abusive application or whose user experiences directly empower attackers. So figure one is centralized, very similar to a TV station or radio station, broadcasting out to a bunch of nodes, but really the nodes have no relationship to each other. We might both be watching, let's say, CNN, but we don't form a relationship to each other based on CNN. We have a relationship with CNN. The internet brings in this idea that some hubs and spokes might end up having relationships to each other. So in the form of hyperlinks or following back. But really what social media does is it creates these distributed networks that are incredibly hard to take down, tend to replicate even if one person gets pulled out of the chain. There are many other connections where they're able to, in many instances, respawn online. So the answer to disinformation and misinformation, we can have a little bit of deplatforming and a little bit of defunding, but eventually what you realize is that these repeat offenders, like people who are invested in creating disinformation campaigns, like the big lie, will always be able to figure out a way to continuously push that information because of the decentralized and distributed networks of social media. And that's why you can't really kill an idea on the internet, for better or for worse. But what we've entered into over the last 10 years is we've moved away from, say, the Occupy movement, early forms of Black Lives Matter, where social movements had a first mover advantage. And now what we have, politicians always take a really long time to catch up. So now what we have are politicians fully invested in doing online digital media strategies and being present every day online. Whereas in the past, to hear from the president was a very rarefied opportunity. Usually it was the State of the Union address, and then if there was a horrible atrocity. And we shut off everything to hear from the president, right? All the local news stations would air the president's words. But now, 8 years into social media and for politicians, like we're 20 years into social media, but politicians really didn't think it was going to catch on. So in 2012, you had Obama and you had Ted Cruz were basically the only two politicians using the internet in a campaign strategy. But ultimately, this design has a lot of flaws for how we might think about information, persuasion, and democracy. which is to say that misinformation is information whose inaccuracy is unintentional and spread unknowingly. So we have, millions of people online that might spread misinformation, and they do it in a way because, especially with medical misinformation, they think they're helping. They're like, I'm going to get this out there. People are dying of COVID. Well, if you sip water every 15 minutes and you can hold your breath for 10 seconds, chances are you'll be fine, right? And that kind of information is stuff that we all saw during the pandemic, and people share it because they think, well, maybe this is what helps. Even with the hydroxychloroquine story or the ivermectin story, it was this idea that maybe the medicine was here all along and we just didn't know it, right? So when Trump was pushing those cures for COVID, it was politically expedient to do it. Disinformation's a little bit different. It's information that is deliberately false or misleading, often spread for political gain, profit, or to discredit a target individual, group, movement, or political party. So I've had this image up here for a little bit. How many people read it and thought, that's disinformation? Yeah? What made you think so?
I think it seems too polished for me in a way.
Yeah? Yeah, like something the Hillary Clinton campaign. Yeah. Right? So what these disinformers did is they got together on Reddit and they grabbed a bunch of pictures online, and then they put Hillary Clinton's logo on it. That's the H logo there. And then they used either draft my wife or draft our daughters. And they even made this fake screenshot of a tweet as if Hillary Clinton was writing, in a world where the battlefield is dominated by men, we need draft our daughters to stand up for equality. Go get 'em, girls. Come on, Hills. Right? The reason why I know this isn't because I was inside the Hillary Clinton campaign, because to be completely frank with you, politicians make me want to vomit. It's because this is a picture of my friend Aaron, who's a Canadian pediatrician, and we went to undergrad together, and someone on Reddit saw it and said, linked it back to him on Facebook and said, is this you, bro? And he was like, I don't, they stole my wedding pictures from my Flickr, and they made these pictures. And when you went back to Reddit, they said, yeah, he looks like a liberal. Like, this is perfect, right? As, and they talked about his weak chin and things like that. And it was just really interesting for me as a scholar, thinking like, if they're making such well-crafted disinformation that it's very hard to detect if that's coming from the campaign or if it's coming from somebody else, then what stage of information warfare are we in when this was a campaign run in 2016? And it's still littered across the net. There's never been any like we talked about earlier, correction or retraction. So what it points to is that we're heading into a moment of mimetic warfare where the tools, tactics, and territories are something that we need to be concerned about. So mimetic warfare is a competition over narrative, ideas, and social control in a social media battlefield. And it has this characteristic of hiving and swarming. That is, the people who are doing these disinformation campaigns, they'll huddle up on one platform, get together, craft a campaign, and then they'll move and swarm on another platform and attack the intended target. One of the things about the Draft Our Daughters campaign was that one of the chief architects and distributors of it was Malik Obama, who is part of Barack Obama's family. And he was saying, that Hillary Clinton's campaign is going to have to answer to this. And that's what was exciting, is that you can get politicians off their game if you spread disinformation. So open source projects like a meme war operate in a chaotic style where methods, materials, and ideas are held in common, copied, traded, and shared. And the state of things is in a functional but seemingly constant flux, which is to say that when Dark Brandon is creating media and it's coming out from the campaign, that doesn't stop anyone else from making Dark Brandon style memes and saying the opposite of what Biden really means to say, right? You can use that media in an insurrectionary type of warfare online. And one of the things that I tried to express to the campaign team was that you don't want to start this fight. You don't want to be the one that gives them the opportunity to come in and then make you respond to them when they, as is expected, come after you with your media. So I want to give you a little bit of insight into how they launched but failed to launch Dark MAGA, and I'll read this quote underneath. This is a post from 4chan, which is an anonymous message board online that gave birth to conspiracy theories like Pizzagate and QAnon. And this is back in May of 2022. One of the things that we see about political operatives online is they're always trying to get people to work for free on behalf of the campaign. And on social media, your audience is your distributor. Right? This is why legacy media is so bad at social media, is they don't realize that every person is a newsstand. So they put their journalism behind a paywall and expect people then to just really like it and subscribe, when really the content is the advertisement in a way. So on this anonymous message board, where people do tend to post some of the most vile content the world has ever seen, some political operative that probably just got a degree in comm wrote this copy. Is it true that Trump is going to sweep the nation again with a brand new campaign built around Dark MAGA? Word on the street is that it's a no bullshit version of MAGA, a kind of MAGA 2.0, which takes all the winning aspects we love so much and cranks them up to 11. What's the meme? Cranks them to 11. Spinal Tap. How do you know that? You're a boomer. You're Gen X. Gen X, okay, the cult classic section then. So word is that once Trump gets back on Twitter, that's when it's all going to get going again, with him announcing his run for president very soon after. And people on 4chan read this and were just like, yawn, this is not it. So the political operatives tried to double down, and they added some new memes for Dark or Ultra MAGA. Who are these women? Yeah, they're from Greece, right? How do we know that? We're boomers. Boomers are anyone over 30 to the internet generation, just so you're aware. But this is not for teenagers. Like, teenagers don't see this and are like, that's a cool meme, right? Like, you know, or Trump that's like, you know, basically Hulk Hogan, right? This kind of like imagery. And then someone posted back a few days later in June, said, forced meme that they tried to astroturf here, rolled out and was mocked mercilessly. Ultra MAGA is their next attempt. And so if your meme doesn't resonate and it feels like a political campaign, a lot of times young folks are going to disengage, or they're going to mercilessly take you down. And so on 4chan, many people knew that, you know, political operatives were trying to kickstart meme wars. But by and large, you can't force a meme. And part of it has to do with that authorless part, and that's tied into the participatory nature of it, is that people are going to want to make memes, and memes that are being made like this don't resonate with young people who make memes. Which I think is kind of funny that they even tried, in a way. I was like, really? Do they think they can go back to 4chan after Trump, you know, didn't build the wall and didn't do all of these awful things he promised to do? So what does it all mean for net war? It means there are blurred lines between citizens, civilians, and combatants online. So when I was at Harvard, we talked a lot about DIME strategy of warfare, which is diplomacy, information, military, and economics. So you do not want to start with the military. That's the last thing you want to do. So you try to manage warfare strategies first with diplomacy, this idea that let's just get the world leaders together and maybe, you know, through some trades and some sanctions, we can work it out. Economics, of course, we saw this very clearly with the war in Ukraine, was that internationally, the banking industry decided to stop moving, rubles and Russian dollars into and out of Russia. So economic sanctions have been a really important aspect here. And information warfare has been thought less of for many years because it was really hard to plant an information campaign in newspapers with journalists that were pretty shrewd about what was happening on their beat. But if you can use the tools of the internet to blur these lines and make people think that certain information is more popular than it really is, or utilize the way in which social media algorithms tend to react to things that are novel and outrageous, or what they call fresh and relevant, you can engender all kinds of panic and political opinions that people may not have even known that they had. And so when we're talking about DIME, we're really talking about what we would call fourth generation warfare. So the democratized nature of participatory media extends the concept of scalability. That is, any piece of information can go viral or can reach millions of people, as anybody with internet access and basic tools can create and distribute their own media for the campaign, essentially becoming a node of the network, where anonymity blurs lines between combatants and civilians in the information war, exemplifying the conditions of what we call fourth generation warfare. So I was trying to really think about this in terms of what it means for domestic political campaigns, because it's no longer the case that we're really arguing about policy anymore. How old do you have to be to get Medicare, and what's the proper age of retirement, or who should have access to health care. It's really become this very polarized world of good versus evil. And part of the design of social media is to separate and make things outrageous trend. And I say this because we're all producers of social media information or signals. But what tends to catch our attention or even inspire us to post is something novel, something interesting. We're not posting mediocre spaghetti dinners. Anything that's mid is not getting up on the Insta, right? Sunsets, they gotta be real bright and real yellow and orange and red. So social media asks us in a way to only show the best and the worst. And when it comes to fourth generation warfare, if we don't even know that polarization is coming from either people in the US or people outside of the US, it becomes a much, much more, for academics, an interesting problem, but for democracies, probably the worst thing that can happen is that we don't have the information we need to make decisions. So what do we know about net war? Well, there was a great study out of Oxford Internet Institute in 2020 where they identified a bunch of what they call cyber troops, which are government or political party actors tasked with manipulating public opinion online. It's happening in 81 countries, including the United States. And cyber troops use social media and the internet as it is designed, while employing social engineering techniques like impersonation, bots, and growth hacking. And it's very different from hacking or other forms of cyber war, which directly attack opponents or infrastructure. As well, these cyber troop organizations spent millions in online advertising to get in front of people. You will notice online that the news finds you. You don't go searching for things find you in the social media ecosystem. So an example in this study was that they found that Iran attacked Palestine on Facebook and Israel on Twitter in 2020, right? And so that kind of taking advantage of an already wedged issue and then amplifying those differences, so it makes it feel like there's an overwhelming amount of people that are invested in certain outcomes. And we do know that other countries are doing that across the social media ecosystem in order to in many ways make us feel apathetic about our political situation. They want us to not vote, to feel like the government is so deranged, which it's a little delulu, I'm not gonna lie. But it's not unsalvageable, right? We get a chance every 4 years to try something different, except this year we have the same thing as 2020. So one of the things that I've really started to get involved in and think about is generative AI. And so when you look up things like Israel-Gaza conflict, what you end up seeing are AI-generated pictures on Adobe stock photos of buildings being blown up and rubble, but these are all AI-generated pictures. Another thing that I found was really quite disturbing was these pictures going around of Palestinian kids holding their cats under the rubble in Gaza. And when I looked at these pictures, I just thought there's something weird about these pictures, because like these cats ain't even trying to get away. And if you're a lesbian with 2 cats, which I am, they don't let you hug them like this, you know? I mean, but in any event, it's a fake. But what does it do? It engenders this feeling of, you know, even more sadness, right? And a lot of us, if you want to activate our sympathy, you harm children or animals, right? Like this idea that the children and the cats and the children are cuddled up together in the rubble. But these are all AI-generated photos being shared as if they're news. And that's the fate of this, is that these stories then get picked up in the news. For instance, one of my favorite follows on X, Cheyenne, he often talks about every day he'll come out with a correction. So this one is a thread on online misinformation being rampant following the escalation of violence between Israel and Hamas. This is a video of a tower block in Gaza being hit by a missile, is from May 2021, not today. It was captured live during a BBC Arabic broadcast at the time. So you have journalists now having to step in and create fact checks that are not even fact checks for, he works at the Wall Street Journal, but you think you fact check your own newspaper. You don't think you've got to fact check everybody on the internet. And there's something about this where fact checkers are now not necessarily in the newsroom, but are being employed in piecemeal ways across social media as a new kind of journalism. And I just don't think that that's a great use of a journalist's time, to be out here being like, someone's wrong on the internet. You know, let me spend the next 4 hours figuring it out. But the tactics of today's net war tend to be what we call recontextualized media, which is this kind of image of something that happened in the past where people are trying to pass it off that it happened today. Imposter accounts, even imposter fact-checking, misinfographics, manipulated video, trolling and brigading or harassment of journalists and activists to get them to shut down their accounts, evidence collages, which are these like, you usually see them in the replies of journalists, and they're usually these very ornate, like someone on the internet did their homework, but they tend to be, you know, full of scoops that are not real stories. As well, hijacked accounts, that means accounts that have been stolen or resold. So sometimes you might forget that you had a Twitter account, and then someone can actually buy that once it becomes deactivated. And we saw in 2016 that hackers and others were buying a bunch of social media accounts that once belonged to US government entities, and like, you know, everyone's an intern in Washington, so I'm sure they start the account and then they move on and the account doesn't get passed on to the next person. And that creates this vacuum for hijacking. And then hollow sourcing, that is writing stories where you don't have a source, or you say the source is anonymous, or you make up an entire person that does not even exist as a source, and you call it news. And so social media in this era that we're in has really introduced a lot of problems for what we might call information integrity. For me, I call it knowledge. Like, remember that? That was good for a while. I have this idea that librarians will get together and sort of save search and social media from itself by bringing some real ontologies into the sorting of information. Please, Nicole, tell me it's coming. I need to know the cavalry's coming. The other thing that's been an artifact and is another tactic in the net war is inspiring incitement. So this idea of networked incitement, which is a socio-technical infrastructure where insurgents use multi-platform communication to command and control mobilized social movements in the moment of action. We saw this very clearly during January 6th, where the people that had stormed the Capitol said, we're not leaving until Trump tells us to. And then when he did tell them to leave, finally, they did file out of the building, but not before, people died, not before hundreds of officers were injured. As well, we're seeing this phenomenon from accounts like Libs of TikTok, which is an account that calls out children's hospitals, librarians, anyone that is part of the life cycle or healthcare of LGBTQ folks. And this account has this particular signature where she will post, and then within minutes, whoever she's posted about will start getting bomb threats. This kind of trolling or brigading is something that we have known for years. There used to be gamers who would call out someone, and then that person would get swatted. That is, the cops would show up at their house thinking that a very violent crime was being committed and, come in guns blazing, trying to stop a kidnapping or a murder in progress. And so we know that networked incitement works to shut down, either through the use of silence or violence, to shut down different folks. And because Libs of TikTok is very trained on stopping LGBTQ education, that affects all of us. And then the doctors that are also being called in, they get told by the bureaucrats higher up at the hospital that they're gonna, remove anything about gender from the website for the hospital because they don't want to become the target of Libs of TikTok. And so this is where I'm at with my thinking about networked incitement, which is that you don't have to be the one doing the threat. You can be the one organizing online so that other people step in and bring the silence and the violence. And that to me seems to be a pretty stable and pattern characteristic of net war that we're not thinking about because our legal standards for incitement are essentially like, I have to tell you, there's a fire here and you need to run out and leave your phones and your wallets on the table, because I'm going to steal your stuff while you're gone. But if you did that now, it'd be pretty awesome. But I'd probably get in trouble, But when you're the sitting president, this is the first time in our lives in January of 2021 that a sitting president called for people to storm the Capitol. And it was a known that that's what was going to happen that day, which is to say that I think we need to hold people who are presidents higher or politicians to higher accounts. So when I'm thinking about net war, I'm thinking about it as something as net war is deployed across online territories, not necessarily bound by borders or governed by proper, what we would call juridical power, where old laws and regulations are not often enforced. And the power structure of net war seems to be governed by corporate terms of service, not the state. The resources are not just monetary instruments, but the ability to scale, deploy, and command large groups across vast spaces and statuses is important. That it imposes a reality through media manipulation and meta-narratives that is really hard to fight back against. And it gives rise to a new power elite like these tech Murdochs, which are eroding democratic institutions. And for me, when I see attacks on education, I see attacks on hospitals, I see attacks on libraries, it strikes me that, and even journalism, that they're coming for our truth-telling institutions. They don't want us to communicate. They don't want us to feel comfortable talking to each other. Like the hardest part of our activism shouldn't be that we're afraid of each other. It should be that, these folks that want to shut us down are afraid of us. But with the way in which, say, we talk about DEI right now, it's like throwing a grenade into the middle of the room. You just don't know when someone's going to explode, right? But we need to be much more resolute. Patricia Hill Collins talked about it as she gave this great lecture after the Unite the Right rally at the American Sociological Association. And she said to a group of sociologists, she said, do you care as much as they do? Because every day white nationalists are getting together and they're doing horrible things. And do we care enough about our information environment? Do we care enough about each other? Do we care enough about it ridding inequalities to do the thing and not just talk about the thing? So I want to talk last section here. Am I good? I got like 10 minutes? Okay, perfect. So the last section here I want to talk about is generative AI and the net war, which is to say that this is here now, generative AI. When I'm talking about it, I'm talking about particularly audio and video that never existed before. So beyond Photoshop, but the use of people's biometric information, that is your face print, or your vocal cords, your vocal your what they call a voice print. These are things that you alone own. And what's happening is very similar to what happened in the early days of big data, where these companies are collecting all this information and then they're saying, never you mind. We're good. Trust us. Can't happen here. But it's happening all around us. And what we need is what Illinois has, which is Biometric Information Privacy Act. Every state needs this, because what we don't understand about these new technologies is they are stealing your very likeness. When we talk about identity fraud, we're talking about, your banking information. That's a kind of digital self or a second self where someone can get your credit card and impersonate you. But this is actual identity theft. And it can happen to any one of us at any time. So what was interesting was a couple of weeks ago, I guess a couple months ago now, there was AI deepfake porn of Taylor Swift, and Yvette Clarke, who's been doing some of the legislation or really trying to put forward some bills against what we call deepfakes. She says, what happened to Taylor Swift is nothing new. For years, women have been targets of deepfakes without their consent, and without advancements in AI, creating deepfakes is easier and cheaper. The issue is both sides of the aisle, and even Swifties should be able to come together to solve. So what was interesting about the AI deepfakes of Taylor Swift that went out over X is that, for the most part, this industry of making pornography with, starlets, movie stars, women, has been here since the 90s. But with deepfakes, it's gotten faster and cheaper to make pornography or sexually explicit material starring someone like Taylor Swift. But not many of us have an entire fan base that is so concerned with where I eat, sleep, and drink that they have the receipts for, if I had spent a day filming a pornography, right? So they knew immediately, and they went after the guy that had put up the deepfake, and he had to shut down his X account because Swifties had figured out where he worked. They called his mom. They went deep into this guy's life trying to get him to feel some shame for what he had done. And he was just one of many people creating deepfakes of women. In the deepfake technology, the videos may have mysterious shadows or inconsistent mouth movements. So we're being told as information consumers, look out, if photos or videos may have extra or missing fingers and teeth or ears, right? As if we're out here trying to tell you what's Gucci, right? And then voices may have some robotic characteristics or lack space for breathing, thinking sounds like or ah, right? It just sounds too smooth. But the idea that we would all need to become such shrewd information consumers that we need to trick machines doesn't seem like progress to me, right? But all tech is progress if you talk to people who create technology. So yeah, who has knowledge of counterfeits? There's the old, are those fake J's, SpongeBob memes. There's Gucci, there's, people that like specialize in understanding watches and counterfeit watches, like at Rolex. So if you get a Rolex that's a counterfeit and it's $300, you could, an expert in Rolex can probably spot that from, 10 feet away. But if you spend 10 grand on a fake Rolex, it's got Sony guts, right? It's got something else inside it. And then you could have this Casio. And you look just like you got a Rolex on, It's my favorite trick, my parlor trick. Which is to say that we also, are we going to develop this counterfeit, watchdog like luxury goods have had to develop and build an entire industry to try to stop these fakes? What is it that we should do? And so I've been thinking a lot about it. And I'm trying to think with the state of the art. So here I'll play for you just a quick video from AOC where you can see how convincing some of these deep fakes can really be. Let me see.
Welcome back to Meet the Press. Thank you for having me. Well, we really appreciate your being here. We are going to get to some tougher questions in just a moment, but I do want to ask you about the swimming race that you recently lost. As you know, you came in dead last during that swimming race. In fact, you failed to even finish one lap in the pool. Why did you come in last place? And I don't want to hear any lame excuses, like it was because you have extra long hair or that your enormous horse teeth slowed you down.
Well, I think it was a totally unfair race. They clearly said at the beginning of the race that it was going to be a breaststroke competition, but the other swimmers totally cheated. They all were using their arms. It was completely unfair. I mean, come on. It was supposed to be a breaststroke only competition.
And do you
So you can see if you're watching that on your phone and it's real small, some of the movements don't line up, but we are children of the buffering generation. We would just chalk that up to technological shifts, right? So this was made by Dilly Meme Team, which is the team that Trump has now started to invite to his rallies and is trying to get them to create more citizen meme media for him, right? But we don't know the difference between citizens and combatants. It could be memes being made by foreign governments that then come to influence how we think about the world.
Congressman, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Let me see if I can make this.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, let me get to the next slide here. And then this one's kind of fun. Remember Bernie? Remember him? I bet you didn't know he dances Bollywood. So this is just hobbyists making these kinds of videos online, right? But it does, it does seem real. It does feel those are outrageous situations, right? But you can kind of get a sense of where the technology, at least where political uses of it are. Oh, it's just gonna keep playing this. Oh, what's this? Well, what we know about state of the art in memes is that we don't look at political operatives for state of the art because, again, they're 10 years behind where the state of the art is. So the pornography industry online takes orders. And so if you want a deep fake of AOC in a certain scene, what they're going to do is create a video of that. And they're going to then do in post, edit out, well, if you think there are extra fingers or missing items on certain people, in AI porn, there are extra wieners. There's a double, triple, 5 boobs. right? Something's weird going on, 14 vaginas, right? The same kind of what they call hallucinations in AI also appear in the deep fakes that they make for political operatives. But it's not just a right-wing or a left-wing problem. Lauren Boebert is very often deep faked, as is Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I was going to play for you the Marjorie Taylor Greene and President Biden sexting and kissing scene, but not today, Satan. Which is to say that there's a market for this, and if there's a market for it in pornography, we know there's going to be a market for it down the line in other places. We also know that high schoolers are now using this generative AI software to deepfake and undress their other classmates. And so once you hand these tools over to the general public, the idea that those technologies could be steered in a pro-democracy or pro-social direction, it just doesn't hold up to facts. So the research that I'm doing now is looking at how the pornography industry really went all in on what they call, quote unquote, deep fucks, and how that might end up becoming the fate of our political media if we're not paying enough attention. Lastly, what we also know is that campaigns are probably going to use this as what we call white propaganda, which is propaganda that we know where it's coming from. So some of the more interesting things that have happened in the last month in terms of deepfakes has been Trump hanging out with black people, because this is totally real. He's just sitting on the stoop with these black guys, totally just hanging out. And then there's this guy over here that's, really campaigning on behalf of Trump. Can y'all spot what in these pictures is wrong? Yeah, Trump's got 3 fingers on one hand, right? A bunch of these guys are missing ears. What about that third arm, right? On the man in the blue? Yeah, he's just got an extra arm there. Now imagine if this is pornography. That's all I'm saying. And again, it's just Trump hanging out with the bays, right? Just out here having a good time. Even got this woman in the background, a little bit older, a lot wiser, probably shouldn't be there. But these are all fakes. These are fakes. These are generated to make it seem like, when Trump went to SneakerCon and tried to, make a scene and thought he'd get some interesting videos and photos of him, but nobody was going near him, they then went and fans of Trump made these deep fakes. So what does it mean for net war? Well, Trump at one point invited in a bunch of social media influencers into Twitter, into the White House, because Twitter was saying that they might shut down Trump's account. And what Trump really did from the bully pulpit of the presidency is ensure that we didn't get any sincere social media innovation around trust and safety or around content, because it would upset his political campaign. It would make it that much harder to do what he was doing if they actually honored their own terms of service. So back then I wrote, no longer an emerging technology imbued with the possibility of fostering social change by giving voice to small groups. Social media has become a tool of the powerful to dominate, harass, and coerce vulnerable groups. And if we do not acknowledge this shift, the freest speech will benefit only those who are already powerful. And the last thing I'll say is that technology is the policy. It's not that we've failed to legislate, it's that we've accepted the technology as it is designed as being the policy itself. And this is something that we have to either get used to or fight against. And what I ask is that in South Carolina, you all start thinking about biometric information privacy and activate your representatives to protect you from this kind of malign influence, and ask that your data about yourself not be commodified in these ways, and also that you ask to hold politicians to account. So that's my spiel. I know it's dark, but we've had a few laughs, so it's good along the way. I'll take some questions. Very good. All right, and we're gonna go with students first. Do you have any students that want to ask a question first? This is, are you a student though?
Oh, yes, I am.
Okay. All right, but I'm expecting my students who I saw mobbed up back there to come through, okay? Yes, please. Kick us off.
All right. So I saw, or I heard that they had an AI voice for Biden
Mm-hmm.
to call voters and say don't vote.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that fit into your meme?
Yeah, so that was actually done by the government is still looking into who created the Biden deepfake, and then it was deployed via robocalls. So it was basically someone used what looks like to be 11 Labs, which allows you, or Parrot.ai, which allows you to type in a script and then it sounds like the AI voice generator. So I've written a lot about this for the conversation about, well, what does this portend? Which is that it's already illegal to impersonate political candidates. And the use of robocalling technology, depending upon the state, is either legal or not legal. But really, to me, what it signals with this was a beta test. This was someone trying to figure out how fast we would react to content that was being distributed, and then also what the actual capabilities of the US government are going to be to track down AI impersonation. And it was a minor note in the State of the Union, but Biden said that he wanted to ban AI impersonation. The only way to do that is with a Biometric Information Privacy Act. Because if you try to regulate the net, what you're gonna run into is people saying, oh, Section 230 means you can't, hold any corporation liable for the content being served on their websites or their apps. But this is different. This is your own likeness or the likeness of, right now, celebrities and politicians. But we do have, there's a great initiative out of UVA and Miami University called the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, headed up by Danielle Citron and Marianne Franks. And they did a lot of work to pass what commonly is called revenge porn laws, or laws that are against, non-consensual image sharing. So there are people out here trying to get these laws passed, trying to protect you, but we are gonna need a full information movement that cares about quality and protects privacy, and also cares about something I call community safety, which is different from thinking of people as users, but thinking about, the product that you're providing has to be safe for more than just a small group of people who benefit from that technology. And it has to have some safety built into it so that once, trans people are outed, there's ways for them to not continuously being harassed if they choose to stay on the platform. Because what we know now is with social media, a lot of the great people are gone. Like a lot of the great journalists that were helping us understand the story behind the story, they're gone. A lot of the great academics that were subpoenaed by the US government, they're gone from social media now. And Cory Doctorow talks about is the enshittification of social media, which is that, because they're thinking so much about the business model and not thinking about the product anymore, it's really leaving open all of this space for harassment, incitement, and hate, especially. All right, I'm looking in this corner. Let me get one student, and then we'll go over here, and then we'll get the other student. Okay. Congratulations on your award.
I have a question maybe about how like AI is using like deepfakes to create stuff. So there is a tool out there called Nightshade that artists are using to poison their art.
Yeah.
So that way AI can't use them. Do you think we'll be seeing more tools like these shown in the future for like social media posts so that way like people are unable to use?
Can you paraphrase the question?
Yep. Yeah, I'll paraphrase it. So basically the question is, some artists have started to use a program called Nightshade that creates problems for the computer vision. So computers don't see like humans. And so computers see in math, and they see the relationship between pixels. And so artists create images that will still look to you like they're art, like it's a dog or flowers, and to the human eye, but to the computer's eye, it doesn't conform to what the computer would typically expect when it was tagging something with dog or with flowers. What we know right now is that AI folks might have deployed their technology too early, because AI models that are trained on AI images, so like the auto-generating images, if they're fed too much of their own products, these AI models do tend to go absolutely haywire. And it might be that by flooding the zone with AI-created images, that you could sabotage these models. You'd have to do it in much greater volume than you are doing it, that is being done now. But if you can get AI-generated content, at least audio and video, into the training models, you can poison them. For now, eventually technologists will figure out, a fail-safe against this. But this is why you're being asked online to tag things that are AI-generated. So like Microsoft and Facebook have come out, TikTok too, saying, we're gonna tag anything that's AI-generated. And that's for the benefit of their own corporation. There's nothing that's protecting you by labeling something as AI. And people who do want to trick you, disinformers, will make sure it doesn't say AI generated, because that's their job, is to trick you. But I do think we're at this moment where artists are realizing that the theft of their products and their skill sets is what's at stake. And I see this happening in this pattern that was popular in the 1960s, to talk about automation as being, the savior of factories, because you can have factories that are building things with no workers. And, what's better than having a comms director that's just ChatGPT and you don't need to pay a salary? And what's better than having a graphic design assistant that is, one of these, DALL-E or any of these technologies that help you build pictures that have never been seen before. And so we are being sold a hope and hype cycle around AI, and I think your generation is probably going to be the ones that shift their careers to try to handle it, and might find out that the AI is designed to get rid of you. I'm hoping it just casts a wide shadow over middle management, and then eventually I don't have to fill out as many forms, But good question. So we were going to go here and then back there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the presentation.
I appreciate
it. No surprise. I think it was somebody connected to the Dean Phillips campaign who produced that robocall.
Uh-huh.
And if you haven't heard of the Dean Phillips campaign, it's probably why they did it.
Yeah.
But I was wondering about your thoughts. You were talking about the commercial basis and the incentive for platforms. Jaron Lanier, about 5 years ago, was sort of promoting an idea that if we got away from ad-based service on the platforms to a subscription-based, that this would solve a lot of problems. Do you find that to be at all hopeful or hopelessly naive?
I don't know. X is experimenting with subscription-based. We'll see if they make, as much money as they've made in the past. I don't know, because frankly, the subscription model isn't working for most journalism, which strikes me that people don't want to pay for content if they can get it for free, right? And so I don't know. I don't know if it would change, because fundamentally the entire social media ecosystem is the infrastructure itself is advertising infrastructure that we all can use, but the real customers are the advertising companies. And so I don't know if advertisers would still pay even if people were subscribing, right? And so I don't think you get rid of the advertising problem by making people subscribe, because literally the very same infrastructure that you use to tweet is the same rails that advertising traffics on, or the same post you put on Instagram is the same technological infrastructure that advertisers are using. And so they really developed around this idea that advertising infrastructure was something that if we could get people to use it in their everyday lives, it would become a place in which people would be thinking they were posting to their friends and family, which we are, but that by developing your own content, becoming your own brand, we see this very clearly in TikTok, which, like, for the 4 people in here that are on TikTok, or maybe more, I don't know. But it's now become like affiliate advertising everything. And so they're not just depending upon you to bring your networks to TikTok. They're telling you, come sell this pet hair vacuum and come sell this mouthwash, and you can get a share in the profit. So affiliate marketing is the next wave of making everyone their own advertiser, not just of their own personal brand, but you get $2 or $10 from selling like the Lenovo earbuds. I mean, we've seen it all on TikTok. And I think that that's where we're headed, is that everyone is an influencer. And I also don't think we can turn it off. That's the other problem, is this is where the money is. This is where you will find a job. This is where you might meet your next spouse. I say that as a divorcee. Never getting married again. But, there's something about the promise of social media to bring you into more exciting spaces. Okay, we had one question back there.
And you just talked about sort of networked incitement, how that played a role in January 6th. And I was wondering if you come across any evidence of our government using that strategy to propagate ideals for certain viewpoints.
I mean, if we talk about classic propaganda studies in comm, your money is propaganda, right? It sells you this idea about, the way in which America used to be and who gets chosen to be on money. So there are all kinds of propaganda that the state does that we just accept as facts. And on social media in particular, we know, at least through some of the Twitter files that were released by Musk, that the government does have shadow social media accounts in the US and in other languages that are meant to do the same thing that I've described, trolls and other kinds of political operatives doing. And the real problem is, it used to be on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, right? There's this old New Yorker cartoon of 2 dogs playing at the computer, and underneath it says, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. But the way that internet architecture has been designed is that Facebook knows when you go anywhere on the net because of the design of the Facebook pixel. So it tracks you as you bounce around the internet from place to place to place. And then it sells that data in the aggregate to people who want to know what your interests are. We'll just leave it loosely at interests. But also, we've seen this marketing or this targeted marketing show up in things like Target was sending out basically like flyers that said like, so you're about to have a baby. And part of it was Target looking at your things that you were buying, like, certain kinds of hand cream, like certain kinds of vitamins, but also matching it with different kinds of data from social media about, what people of that age were experiencing. And that kind of target marketing can be pretty insidious. For the woman who's trying to get pregnant but isn't pregnant, getting a flyer like that in the mail just feels awful. Or if you're a teen and you went to Target to buy a pregnancy test, like you don't need your dad seeing that. So there's a lot of ways in which our data gets used and repackaged and then redeployed. But in terms of our government uses of it, they do buy an inordinate amount of telecoms data and data about essentially like location that is generated from you just walking around with your phone all day. And that to me screams of problems when it comes to personal privacy. But what they might say in the government is, oh, we needed that data because we're thinking about building more bike lanes, right? We need to know how people are traveling. And so there's a lot that goes on in terms of this data capture that we don't really even know, and that people who are using that data also don't want us to know, which is the unfortunate side effect is, you might go into the internet with this idea that when I shut off the computer, it shuts off, right? But now that we have these mobile phones and we're bringing them everywhere, more than just Sprint and T-Mobile. Sprint's dead now. But T-Mobile and Verizon know that we're all in a room together. Any of the cookies on your phone that are pulling data into apps, they also might know if we have the same app in our phone that we're in the same room.
Send money.
Well, the only way to get money is to get a TikTok account, become an affiliate marketer, and sell mouthwash. So it's all good. Everybody an entrepreneur. Yes, in the back here.
This is a brilliant lecture. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
One of the things I've seen as I've been teaching undergraduate students is a remarkably different approach to privacy, to the issue of privacy. So in this part of your talk, you've been horrifying those of us of a certain generation. And yet I don't see the younger people being appalled by what's happening or thinking about it. And I wondered what your sense of that was.
I mean, when I was in my 20s, I looked up to the people in their 40s who had their shit together that was trying to get stuff done. And I think that movements really do need leaders, and people need to put themselves out there and say, like, this is the one thing I'm going to care about this year. And so for me, like the Biometric Information Privacy Act, I don't do policy, but I feel like this is something that protects me and my community. And so I'm going to meet with Congress members. I'm going to get that done, at least in Massachusetts, because to be honest, the federal government can't see past their own navels, right? But there are ways in which we do need to step up in our age and say these things matter, and use the prestige of our positions at universities to say, this is the thing I really care about, and I want to make sure that these people are protected. I think we put a lot of emphasis on young people because that's where the hope lies, right? Is that the next generation will know everything we knew and more, and that they're gonna bring about a world that is a little less self-interested and a little bit more publicly minded. The danger, I think, of social media is that even though it brings you into contact with more people, the strength of those ties tend to be very weak. And, for people to have full political lives, they have to feel like the person next to them is going to stand up with them when they, you know, go on strike or when they have to advocate for something. And that's hard. They also have to feel like journalists care about these issues. And journalists in the tech sector are exhausted by what's happening. But I do think, yeah, there's a little bit of young people that need to step up and say, you know, we're not going to do this. And I had the pleasure of, you know, seeing someone like David Hogg in action at Harvard, and he's built a nonprofit now that puts new leaders in office. And a lot of people think, well, that's, you know, that's fine. It's not, you know, it's not, nobody's ambition is to be a nonprofit owner like that's, you know, putting people in local government. It's not like, they don't teach that in college, right? You have to decide that this is the skill set that you have and you want to better this world. And so I'm really putting the responsibility on my own shoulders right now to do this, because I'm at that age where I can throw my scholarship around and I can let people know that I've thought a lot about this, and we do need people to stand up, especially these technology companies, because these technology companies are awful. Like, awful in a way that I haven't seen that awful since the rise of big tobacco, right? And what did big tobacco do? They went into the universities, they bought up all the researchers, and then they told everybody that there's no problem here. And now, as our friends and family are suffering through lung cancer, right? Our responsibility isn't to know better. Our responsibility is to trust people who know better. But when those people can be bought off, and, you know, it takes a special kind of aggression, I would say, to keep going back into that fight, knowing that it feels too big to win. But I think we have a winning case with biometric information privacy, which would stop the development of deepfakes in their tracks, and it would make all deepfakes illegal, rather than this very arduous and weird no law that we have now, where any data that they get is theirs to use. There's a very good book by Kashmir Hill called Your Face Belongs to Us, about the rise of generative AI and facial recognition, but particularly about this company called Clearview AI, which perfected facial recognition to the point where they only need one picture of your face, and then they can pull up all of your data online, so any other place that you have pictures online. And they're selling that technology exclusively to law enforcement, right? So we need to be, you know, and this is all threaded through Peter Thiel. You know, there's, yeah, the Palantir is another aspect of this, which is to say our data is ours to own and our data is ours to erase. And so I do think that there's a lot more work that can be done by people of our generation as well as young folks. But I don't expect young folks to understand all the things that are happening here, because it's complicated and it's dry, it's nerdy, and that's my sweet spot. Thank you. Go home. Thank you, Tom.
Joan, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we loved it. Lots of sobering information and certainly some insights tonight. And I think if we saw a couple more of those videos, somebody's mom was going to get called, so not sure about that. Listen, let's give another hand to Joan Donovan. So, Deans and Directors is one of my favorite events of the year, and this is certainly did not disappoint tonight. I just want to thank Dr. Donovan for joining us all the way from Massachusetts. Thank you again. Yes. Dean Banish and our friends at Thomas Cooper Library, thank you so much for partnering with us tonight for the event. Dr. Lyda McCartan director of the program. I want to appreciate your work on making everything run so smoothly tonight, as well as your team. Honorees, congratulations to all of you again for all that you do and your support to strengthen library and information science, both here within the university as well as within our communities. Last, I want to thank all of you for being here this evening as we celebrate what's best about the iSchool. And what's always so fulfilling to me is to see our former directors and deans here at this event. So thank you all for being here too. I appreciate that. So last thing I'll say is helping people make informed decisions is at the core of what we do. It's clear that mis and disinformation is a grand challenge, and if we can't solve it or address it, then we can't solve any of society's big challenges when it comes to climate, vaccinations, or electoral integrity. So I think that we've got our work to do, but I am optimistic that we've got some folks in Massachusetts, we've got some here, people in our college as well at the university and around the country that are really working hard to address that. So thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for your support of the School of Information Science. Thank you.